Chapter 1, Repairs in the Void. The metallic hum of the Aurora's Dream filled the cramped confines of the maintenance bay as astronaut John Martinez floated in zero gravity, his magnetic boots clicking softly against the hull. Earth hung like a blue marble in the distance, while the moon's cratered surface loomed beneath his spacecraft. He had been stationed here for 3 months, conducting routine maintenance on the Lunar Orbital Research Station. Just another day in paradise, John muttered into his comm unit, adjusting the plasma welder in his gloved hands. The solar array's connection had been acting up again, threatening to leave the station without power. At 34, John had logged more spacewalk hours than most astronauts his age, but the isolation of deep space never quite left him comfortable. The stars stretched endlessly in all directions, their light cold and distant. John had always found space both beautiful and terrifying, the vast emptiness that separated worlds, the silence that could swallow a man's screams. He focused on his work, running diagnostics on the ship's primary systems. Control, this is Martinez. Solar array repairs are nearly complete. All systems showing green across the board, he reported, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet visor. Copy that, John. Good work up there. Weather's looking rough down here, another hurricane forming in the Atlantic. Makes you appreciate the peace and quiet, doesn't it? Came the crackling response from Mission Control. John smiled grimly. Peace and quiet, indeed. Out here, the only sounds were his own breathing and the gentle hum of life support systems. He secured the final connection and began packing his tools when something caught his eye, a shimmer in space itself, like heat distortion but impossibly more complex. Control, are you seeing this? There's some kind of anomaly forming approximately 2 clicks off my starboard bow. Static filled his comm channel. Say again, Martinez? You're breaking up. The shimmer grew larger, spinning slowly, its edges crackling with what looked like purple lightning. John's instruments went haywire, readings fluctuating wildly as electromagnetic interference flooded his systems. The anomaly expanded rapidly, becoming a swirling vortex of energy that seemed to tear space itself apart. Control. Control, do you copy? I've got a massive spatial distortion here. It's... The words died in his throat as gravitational forces seized his ship. The Aurora's Dream groaned and creaked as invisible hands pulled it toward the impossible portal. John fought frantically with the controls, firing thrusters at maximum burn, but nothing could resist the inexorable pull. Emergency Protocol 7. Repeat, Emergency Protocol 7, he shouted into his comm, but only static answered. The portal filled his viewport now, a tunnel of swirling energy and fractured light that hurt to look at directly. The ship crossed the threshold, and reality shattered. Chapter 2, A New Sky. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the steady beep of emergency alarms. John's head throbbed as he unbuckled himself from the pilot's chair, noting with relief that artificial gravity had been restored. The Aurora's Dream appeared intact, but outside the viewport, an alien sky greeted him. 2 suns blazed in the heavens, one golden like Earth's sun, the other a fierce red giant that painted everything in copper tones. Between them, a massive black hole dominated the celestial landscape, its event horizon visible as a perfect circle of absolute darkness surrounded by an accretion disk of superheated matter. What in God's name? John whispered, running a full diagnostic on his instruments. The results were impossible. He was in orbit around an unknown planet in a star system that shouldn't exist. The gravitational readings alone defied everything he knew about physics. The planet below was a study in contradictions. Vast green continents sprawled beneath swirling white clouds, while crimson deserts stretched between mountain ranges that gleamed like crystal. 3 small moons danced in the sky, their orbits creating complex tidal patterns on the world's numerous oceans. John spent hours analyzing the data, trying to make sense of his situation. The portal, if that's what it had been, was gone, leaving no trace of its existence. His communication arrays detected no signals from Earth, no familiar pulsars to help establish his location. For all intents and purposes, he was alone in an impossible place. The planet's atmosphere registered as breathable, though with a slightly higher oxygen content than Earth. Gravity was roughly 0.8 standard, which would make movement easier but require adjustment. Most importantly, his sensors detected signs of complex life, not just vegetation, but what appeared to be sophisticated settlements scattered across the main continent. First contact protocol, John murmured, accessing his mission files. Though he'd never expected to use these procedures, his training had covered the possibility of encountering alien intelligence. The question was whether that intelligence would be friendly. His ship's fusion reactor had enough fuel for several months, but landing would be irreversible. The Aurora's Dream wasn't designed for atmospheric re-entry and takeoff. Yet staying in orbit indefinitely wasn't an option either. Eventually, something would go wrong, and he'd die alone in the void of an alien star system. John made his decision. He began calculating landing trajectories, looking for a suitable site near one of the settlements but far enough away to avoid causing panic. The largest continent had what appeared to be a vast forest region with several clearings large enough to accommodate his ship. As he initiated the landing sequence, John whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening in this strange new universe. He was about to become humanity's first interstellar ambassador, whether he was ready or not. Chapter 3: Descend into the Unknown. The Aurora's Dream screamed through the alien atmosphere, its heat shields glowing cherry red as John fought to maintain control. The ship bucked and rolled in the turbulent air, warning lights flashing across every display. This wasn't the controlled descent he'd planned. Atmospheric conditions were far more chaotic than his instruments had indicated. "Come on, baby, hold together," he muttered, adjusting attitude thrusters to compensate for unexpected wind shears. The golden sun blazed overhead while its red companion hung lower on the horizon, creating an otherworldly sunset that painted the clouds in shades of amber and crimson. Below, the forest canopy rushed up to meet him. John had seconds to decide between a crash landing in the trees or trying to reach a clearing another kilometer ahead. The ship's integrity was failing, hull plates beginning to buckle under the stress. He pulled up hard, using the last of his maneuvering fuel to clear the treetops. The clearing appeared ahead, a roughly circular meadow surrounded by towering trees with crystalline bark that reflected the dying light. John cut the engines and braced for impact. The Aurora's Dream hit the ground hard, bounced twice, and skidded to a stop against a fallen log the size of a small building. Silence fell, broken only by the cooling metal of his ship and the alien sounds of an unknown world. John ran through his systems check with shaking hands. Life support was stable, structural integrity compromised but holding, communication arrays completely dead. He was alive, but thoroughly stranded. Outside, the forest was awakening to whatever passed for night on this world. Bioluminescent plants began to glow with soft blue and green light, while strange calls echoed from the darkness between the trees. John activated his ship's external cameras and lights, scanning the perimeter for signs of immediate danger. The trees themselves were wonders, their crystal bark pulsed with internal light, while their leaves seemed to be made of a material that shifted between organic and metallic properties. Flowering vines draped between the trunks, their blooms opening and closing in response to the ship's lights. But it was the eyes that made John's blood run cold. Dozens of them, reflecting his ship's illumination from the forest's depths. Some were large and oval, others small and multifaceted like an insect's compound eyes. They watched him with an intelligence that was unmistakably alien yet hauntingly familiar. John sealed his environmental suit and checked his sidearm, a plasma pistol designed more for emergency situations than combat. His mission parameters had never included armed conflict with alien species, but he wasn't naive enough to assume peaceful intentions. The first night on this unnamed world passed slowly. John dozed fitfully in his pilot's chair, starting awake at every new sound from the forest. By dawn, marked by the rising of the golden sun while the red giant set, he had made his decision. He couldn't stay locked in his ship forever. Eventually, he would have to venture outside and make contact with whatever intelligence governed this world. As morning light filtered through the crystal trees, John began his preparations for humanity's first steps on an alien world. Chapter 4: First Contact. The atmosphere was indeed breathable, though it carried scents John had never experienced, something like cinnamon mixed with ozone, with undertones of flowering plants that didn't exist on Earth. His boots crunched on ground cover that resembled moss but felt springy like rubber beneath his feet. John moved cautiously through the clearing, his helmet camera recording everything for posterity, assuming he ever found a way home. The crashed remains of his ship looked pitifully small against the backdrop of towering crystal trees. He was truly alone now, farther from home than any human had ever been. A sound made him freeze, footsteps, but not quite human. The rhythm was familiar, bipedal, but with a subtle difference in cadence that suggested a different bone structure. John drew his plasma pistol and called out, his voice translator attempting to broadcast in mathematical sequences that might represent peaceful intentions. They emerged from the forest like ghosts, moving with fluid grace between the trees. John's first impression was of tall, slender beings that walked upright like humans but possessed an otherworldly elegance. Their skin had a metallic sheen that shifted between silver and blue, while their faces were angular and symmetrical in a way that was both beautiful and unsettling. The leader, John assumed it was the leader based on the more elaborate markings covering its torso, stood roughly 7 feet tall. Its large, almond-shaped eyes were the color of liquid mercury, reflecting intelligence, and what John hoped was curiosity rather than hostility. When it spoke, the words were musical, like wind chimes mixed with electronic tones. I don't understand, John said, holding up his hands to show he was unarmed, having holstered his weapon. I'm from Earth. Another world. I didn't mean to intrude. The being tilted its head, studying him with those mercury eyes. Then, to John's amazement, it began to speak in heavily accented but recognizable English. Earth human, it said slowly, as if testing the words. We have heard your transmissions. Radio waves. Your entertainment broadcasts have reached us across the void. John nearly laughed with relief and amazement. They had learned English from television and radio signals that had somehow traveled across impossible distances. You understand me? I am ZYX9742, but you may call me ZYX. I am what you would term a Cybertan. We are the primary inhabitants of this world, which we call Kepler-Zendara. The being's voice was becoming more fluid as it spoke, adapting to human speech patterns in real time. My name is John Martinez. I'm an astronaut, a space traveler from Earth. I was pulled here through some kind of portal. I don't know how to get home. ZYX's expression, if it could be called that, seemed to soften. Portal travel is dangerous. Unstable. Many who enter the void tiers never emerge. You are fortunate to survive with your sanity intact. Other Cybertans emerged from the forest, their metallic skin catching the morning light. John counted at least 20, all studying him with the same mixture of curiosity and caution. They wore no clothing in the traditional sense, but their bodies were adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to serve both decorative and functional purposes. We must bring you to the Council of Nodes, ZYX continued. They will decide your fate. Some among my people fear outsiders, especially those from the void. Others are curious about your species. The outcome is uncertain. John nodded, understanding that he had little choice in the matter. He was completely dependent on these beings for survival. I'll come willingly. But I should ask, are there others on this world? Other species? ZYX's mercury eyes darkened. Yes. The Vortak control the northern territories, and the Skeltar dominate the western archipelago. Both are less welcoming to strangers than we Cybertans. This world knows much conflict, human John. You have chosen a dangerous time to arrive. As the Cybertans began to escort him away from his crashed ship, John wondered if he had escaped one impossible situation only to find himself in the middle of an interplanetary war. Chapter 5, The City of Nodes. The journey to the Cybertan city took most of the day, following paths that seemed to grow beneath their feet as they walked. John marveled at the technology. The ground itself appeared to be semi-organic, responding to the Cybertan's presence by creating smooth walkways through the forest. ZYX walked beside him, explaining their world's history in careful, measured tones. Kepler Zendara has been our home for over 10,000 of your years. We evolved from what you might call digital consciousness, gaining physical form through advanced nanotechnology. Our bodies are both biological and mechanical, allowing us to interface directly with our world's technological systems. The forest gradually gave way to more structured landscapes, gardens where geometric patterns of plants grew in perfect mathematical harmony, streams that flowed in spirals and helixes rather than straight lines, and towers of the same crystal material as the trees that hummed with barely audible energy. The other species, John asked, how long have they been here? The Vortak arrived first, refugees from a dying world beyond the binary stars. They are aggressive by nature, but not without honor. The Skeltar came later, bringing with them technologies we did not recognize. They claimed the ocean territories and have remained largely separate from land dwellers, until recently. What changed recently? ZYX's pace slowed, and his metallic features seemed to dim. Resources. The black hole's gravity affects our planet's core, creating unique crystalline formations that all three species require for our advanced technologies. As the formations become rarer, competition increases. War seems inevitable. The city appeared before them like something from a fever dream. Towering spires of living crystal rose from the forest floor, their surfaces covered in flowing patterns of light that John realized were data streams. The city itself was a massive computer. Buildings grew from the ground rather than being constructed, their organic curves and angles defying conventional architecture. Cybertans moved through the city on flowing pathways that carried them at incredible speeds, while others simply materialized and vanished, teleporting through what ZYX explained was the city's quantum transportation network. The air hummed with energy, and John's skin tingled from electromagnetic fields that permeated everything. The Council of Nodes awaits, ZYX announced as they approached the largest spire at the city's center. You must understand, Human John, that not all Cybertans view your arrival favorably. Some believe outsiders bring only chaos and destruction. Others see opportunity for learning and growth. The decision of how to treat you will not be unanimous. John nodded grimly. His fate would be decided by beings whose thought processes he couldn't begin to understand, in a place where the laws of physics seemed more like gentle suggestions. He thought of Earth, impossibly distant now, and wondered if anyone there had noticed his disappearance. The spire's entrance dilated like an iris as they approached, revealing an interior that defied spatial geometry. The chamber beyond seemed far larger than the structure that contained it, with floating platforms suspended in what appeared to be empty space. On each platform sat a Cybertan whose body glowed with more intense patterns than any John had seen. The Council of Nodes, ZYX whispered. They are our eldest and wisest, beings who have existed since our species gained physical form. Speak truthfully, Human John. They will know if you lie. As John stepped onto the central platform, feeling it rise smoothly into the impossible space above, he prepared to argue for his life before minds that had existed for millennia. The first challenge of his new existence was about to begin. Chapter 6, Trial by Lightning. The Council of Nodes spoke without words, their thoughts flowing directly into John's mind like electric currents. The sensation was overwhelming, emotions, concepts, and memories that weren't his own crashed through his consciousness like a digital tsunami. The outsider arrives in fire and metal, came the first voice, ancient and resonating with power. He carries the scent of distant worlds and the chaos of the void tears. Yet he comes not as conqueror but as lost wanderer, countered another, this one feeling somehow more sympathetic. His thoughts are primitive but pure, unguarded by the deceptions we have learned to expect. John struggled to form coherent thoughts under the telepathic assault. I didn't choose to come here. I was pulled through a portal while working in Earth's lunar orbit. I mean no harm to your people or your world. Truth, several voices agreed simultaneously. His mind holds no malice, no plans of conquest or exploitation. But neither does it hold understanding of the forces he has disturbed. The central figure of the council, whose body blazed with patterns of gold and white light, leaned forward. When it spoke, its mental voice carried the weight of eons. I am Node Prime Alpha, eldest of the Conclave. Human John Martinez of Earth Sol 3, your arrival coincides with prophecies we had hoped never to see fulfilled. Prophecies? John managed to ask, his head pounding from the mental contact. The void tears are not random phenomena. They appear when the cosmic balance shifts, when great changes approach. Your presence here signals that such a change is imminent. The question is whether you are herald of salvation or harbinger of destruction. Images flooded John's mind, visions of other worlds, other species, other travelers who had arrived through portal storms. Some had brought knowledge and peace. Others had brought war and devastation. The Cybertans had learned to be cautious with interdimensional refugees. Furthermore, another node interjected, the Vortak have detected your ship's energy signature. They are mobilizing war bands, believing your arrival to be an invasion prelude. The Skeltar have withdrawn to their deep-sea cities, preparing for siege warfare. Your presence has already begun to destabilize our fragile peace. John felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. His simple crash landing had apparently triggered a planet-wide crisis. What can I do? I never wanted any of this. I just want to find a way home. That may not be possible, Node Prime Alpha replied, its mental voice heavy with regret. The portal that brought you here has collapsed. Our quantum physicists detect no similar phenomena in local space-time. You may be permanent resident of Kepler-Zendara, whether any of us desire it or not. The implications hit John like a physical blow. He might never see Earth again, never return to the life he'd known. But more immediately, his presence was about to plunge an entire world into war. However, the sympathetic voice from earlier spoke up, there may be alternative. The crystal cores that power our civilizations, they are connected to quantum foam of spacetime itself. If properly configured, they might be capable of generating portal phenomena. But accessing them would require cooperation of all three species. Impossible, snorted another node. The Vortak and Skeltar would never cooperate on such a scale. Their hatred runs too deep, their territorial disputes too severe. John sensed an opportunity. What if I could help broker peace between your peoples? I'm neutral, I have no stake in your conflicts. Maybe an outsider's perspective could find solutions you've overlooked. The council fell silent, their thoughts buzzing between them in communication too rapid for John to follow. Finally, Node Prime Alpha spoke again. You propose to solve in days what we have failed to accomplish in centuries. The arrogance is refreshing. Very well, Human John. We will grant you opportunity to attempt this impossible task. But know that failure likely means death, yours and potentially thousands of others when the wars begin in earnest. I understand the risks. But I have to try. Then you will serve as Cybertan ambassador to both the Vortak and Skeltar. ZYX 9742 will accompany you as guide and translator. But first, you must survive the tests we will impose upon you. Only one who understands our world's dangers can hope to navigate its politics. As the platform began to descend, John realized that his real journey on Kepler-Zendara was only just beginning. The trials ahead would test not just his courage and intelligence, but his very humanity in a world where nothing was familiar except the will to survive. Chapter 7, Into the Crystal Depths. The testing grounds lay beneath the Cybertan city, in caverns that pulsed with the same bioluminescent energy as the crystal trees above. John descended on a platform that seemed to be made of solidified light, accompanied by ZYX and two other Cybertans whose names translated roughly to Battle Instructor and Life Monitor. The trials you will face mirror the challenges of our world, ZYX explained as they descended deeper into the earth. Physical danger, mental manipulation, and moral choices that have no clear answers. Many Cybertans undergo these tests as part of their coming-of-age rituals. Few outsiders have ever attempted them. The first chamber opened into a vast underground forest, but this vegetation was clearly predatory. Vines thick as John's torso writhed through the air, while flowers the size of satellite dishes tracked his movement with unblinking sensory organs. The air itself seemed alive, thick with spores that made his eyes water even through his environment suit's filters. "The Thorn Maze," Battle Instructor announced, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested amusement. "Navigate to the far chamber without being consumed. Use whatever tools you possess, but know that brute force often leads to death here." John studied the writhing mass of hostile plant life, looking for patterns in their movement. The vines swayed in complex rhythms, but there were gaps, moments when pathways opened through the carnivorous garden. It would require perfect timing and no small amount of luck. He began to move, darting between grasping tendrils and diving under snapping trap flowers. His training as an astronaut had prepared him for three-dimensional thinking, and he used that skill now to plot a course through the vertical maze. When one vine caught his boot, he drew his plasma pistol and severed it with a precisely aimed shot. The plants reacted to the energy discharge with increased aggression, but John was already moving, using their own violent motions to his advantage. He swung from vine to vine like some demented Tarzan, always staying one step ahead of the gnashing biological mechanisms that wanted to digest him. When he finally reached the far chamber, breathing heavily but unharmed, the Cybertans' approval was evident in the brightening of their skin patterns. "Impressive adaptation," Battle Instructor noted. "You think in 3 dimensions naturally, a useful skill on a world with multiple gravity fields." The second test was mental rather than physical. John found himself in a chamber filled with floating holographic displays, each showing different scenarios playing out across Kepler's Zendara. Some showed Vorthack war parties preparing for battle, others depicted Skeltar deep-sea installations, and still others revealed hidden Cybertan defensive systems. "Information warfare," ZYX explained. "Each display shows truth mixed with deception. You must identify which scenarios are genuine intelligence and which are enemy misinformation designed to provoke poor decisions." John studied the displays carefully, drawing on his military training to analyze the tactical situations. The Vorthack display showed massive troop movements, but something about the formations seemed wrong, too neat, too obvious. The Skeltar images depicted weapons that seemed beyond their established technology level. Only the Cybertan display showed the kind of operational messiness that John associated with real military preparations. "The Vorthack and Skeltar displays are deceptions," he announced. "Designed to make each species seem more threatening than they actually are, probably to prevent peace negotiations." "Correct," Life Monitor confirmed. "But can you identify the source of the false intelligence?" John examined the data streams more carefully, looking for digital fingerprints. There are subtle commonalities in the coding structure, suggestions that both sets of false data came from the same source. Someone is playing all 3 sides against each other. A fourth party that benefits from the conflict. The Cybertans exchanged rapid bursts of light communication. Finally, ZYX spoke. "You have identified what we have long suspected but could not prove. There are forces at work on Kepler's Zendara that seek to perpetuate conflict for their own purposes." "Who?" John asked. "That," Battle Instructor replied grimly, "is what you must help us discover. But first, one final test." The third chamber contained no obvious dangers, just a simple scenario, a holographic family of some alien species John didn't recognize, cowering in what appeared to be a burning building. A timer counted down from 60 seconds. "You have 1 minute to save them," Life Monitor announced. "But know that acting to save them will trigger security systems that will attempt to kill you. Inaction means their certain death. Action means probable death for all involved. Choose." John stared at the scenario, recognizing it for what it was, a test of moral character under impossible circumstances. In his astronaut training, he'd learned that sometimes there were no good choices, only necessary ones. He acted without hesitation, diving into the holographic scene to reach the trapped family. Energy beams lanced through the air around him, and he felt the heat of near misses. But he reached the family, gathered them up, and carried them to safety just as the timer reached 0. The holograms vanished, leaving John alone in the chamber with smoking scorch marks on his environment suit. "Why?" ZYX asked simply. "Because sometimes being human means making the choice that's right rather than the choice that's safe," John replied. If I'm going to represent your people to others, they need to know that I value life, all life. The Cybertans' approval was unmistakable now, their entire bodies blazing with patterns of gold and silver light. You have passed the trials, Human John, battle instructor announced formally. You are now recognized as a voice of the nodes, authorized to speak on behalf of the Cybertan Collective. May you succeed where we have failed. As they began the ascent to the surface, John felt the weight of his new responsibility. He was no longer just a stranded astronaut trying to get home. He was now a diplomat in an alien war, with the fate of civilizations hanging in the balance. Chapter 8, The Vorthak Territory. The journey to Vorthak lands took 3 days across terrain that defied John's understanding of planetary geology. The twin suns' gravitational effects created landscapes where water flowed uphill, where stone formations grew like living things, and where the very air shimmered with barely contained energy. ZYX had undergone some kind of modification for the journey, his usual silver-blue skin now appearing more matte and rough, with additional armor plating that emerged from his body like organic mail. The Vorthak respect strength above all else, he explained. Appearing vulnerable would be seen as insulting to their warrior culture. They traveled in a Cybertan vehicle that John could only describe as a living machine, part technology, part organism. It flowed across the landscape like liquid metal while providing perfect environmental protection. Through its transparent walls, John watched the scenery change from crystal forests to hardened lava fields to finally the jagged mountain ranges that marked Vorthak territory. The first sign of the Vorthak themselves was a patrol that intercepted them at the territorial border. John's first impression was of demons from human mythology, tall, powerfully built beings with deep red skin, pronounced cranial ridges, and eyes that glowed like coals. They wore armor that seemed to be forged from volcanic glass, and they carried weapons that crackled with barely contained plasma energy. Cybertan scum, the patrol leader growled in a voice like grinding stones. You bring the void spawn to our lands? You court death. ZYX's response was equally aggressive, his voice taking on harmonics John had never heard before. We come under flag of parley, Flameskull. The outsider seeks audience with the war chieftain cracks. Will you honor ancient law, or has Vorthak courage fallen so low that you fear one small human? The insult had the desired effect. The patrol leader's eyes blazed brighter, and his grip tightened on his weapon, but he stepped aside. Pass, Metal Blood. But know that cracks will likely feed your companion to the lava worms for sport. The Vorthak capital was built into the side of an active volcano, its buildings carved from cooled magma and reinforced with some kind of heat-resistant metal. Lava flows had been channeled into decorative patterns throughout the city, providing both illumination and a constant reminder of the destructive forces the Vorthak had learned to harness. The inhabitants moved with predatory grace through streets that would have been unbearably hot for humans. John's environment suit's cooling systems worked overtime as they ascended the winding paths toward the war chieftain's stronghold at the volcano's peak. Remember, ZYX advised as they approached the fortress, show no fear, but also no disrespect. The Vorthak value honesty and directness. Deception is considered the mark of cowardice among their people. War Chieftain Krax was an impressive specimen even by Vorthak standards, nearly 8 feet tall, with scars crisscrossing his red hide and cybernetic implants that glowed with internal fire. He sat on a throne carved from a single piece of volcanic glass, surrounded by his war council. So, Krax rumbled, his voice echoing through the chamber like distant thunder, the void brings us a new plaything. Tell me, small human, why should I not have you thrown into the sacred fires as an offering to the mountain spirits? John stepped forward, grateful that his environment suit concealed his nervousness. Because I might be the key to ending the resource wars that are bleeding all 3 peoples dry. Because I come from outside your conflicts and can see solutions you might have missed. And because, he added, taking a calculated risk, throwing me into the fire would be the act of a coward who fears what I might say. The chamber fell deadly silent. Several of the war council reached for their weapons, while Krax's eyes blazed like miniature suns. For a moment, John thought he had badly miscalculated. Then Krax threw back his head and roared with laughter, a sound like an avalanche mixed with industrial machinery. Bold. I like this one. He has the courage to insult me to my face. That shows warrior spirit. Very well, Void Spawn, I will hear your words. But choose them carefully. My patience burns hot but brief. John took a deep breath, knowing that his next words might determine not just his own fate, but the future of 3 civilizations. The real work of diplomacy was about to begin. Chapter 9, Forging Alliances in Fire. The negotiation with War Chieftain Krax lasted through the night, conducted in a chamber where lava flows provided the only light, and the heat would have killed an unprotected human in minutes. John found himself sweating despite his suit's cooling systems, but he persevered, knowing that showing weakness would end any chance of success. You speak of cooperation, Krax growled, his massive form shifting on the obsidian throne, but what do the metal bloods and fish spawn offer that we cannot simply take by force? The crystal cores beneath their territories call to us. Our warriors grow restless for battle. John had prepared for this question during the journey. Because taking by force means destroying what you're fighting for. The crystal cores are delicate quantum structures, damage them with weapons fire, and they become useless to everyone. But working together, all 3 peoples could share the resources while developing new technologies that make conflict unnecessary. Share? The word seemed foreign in Krax's mouth. Vorthak do not share. We conquer or we die trying. It is our way. Your way is leading to extinction, John replied bluntly, drawing on his analysis of the planet's resource distribution. The cores are finite. Within 50 years, they'll be exhausted if exploitation continues at current rates. But if the 3 peoples combine their technologies, Cybertan quantum manipulation, Skeltar bioengineering, and Vorthak energy control, you could synthesize new power sources. Krax leaned forward, interested despite himself. You speak of technologies we have not mastered. How could such cooperation be achieved when blood feuds span centuries? By starting small, John suggested. Joint research projects. Shared defensive operations against the predatory life forms that threaten all settlements. Cultural exchanges that break down the barriers of misunderstanding. The War Chieftains' Council muttered among themselves in rapid Vorthak, their voices like steel scraping stone. Finally, one of them spoke up, a scarred female whose cybernetic implants glowed with cool blue light instead of the usual red. I am Sub-Chieftain Thyra, she announced. I have studied the outsider's words. There is logic in what he proposes. But how can we trust the metal bloods who speak in riddles, or the fish spawn who hide in their deep-sea cities? John sensed an opening. Trust must be earned through actions, not words. What if I arranged a demonstration? A joint operation that benefits all 3 peoples while proving that cooperation is possible? What kind of operation? Krax demanded. John had been thinking about this possibility since his first day on the planet. The predatory ecosystem near the southern crystal core sites, it threatens all 3 territories equally. A coordinated expedition to establish a protective perimeter would benefit everyone while requiring minimal resource sharing. ZYX, who had remained silent throughout the negotiations, finally spoke. The Thorn Beast Convergence. It is indeed a threat that grows worse each season. Cybertan settlements have been forced to relocate 3 times in the past year. And Vorthak mining operations have lost 47 warriors to the creatures, Thyra added grimly. Krax was silent for long moments, his glowing eyes fixed on John with an intensity that felt like standing too close to a forge. Finally, he spoke. You propose that Vorthak warriors fight alongside metal bloods and fish spawn against a common enemy. The idea is, not without merit. But such cooperation would require guarantees. What kind of guarantees? John asked. Safe passage through all territories for the duration of the operation. Shared intelligence about creature movements and weaknesses. And most importantly, Krax's voice dropped to a threatening rumble, assurance that neither of the other peoples will use the operation as cover for territorial expansion. John nodded. Those terms seem reasonable. I'll need to present the proposal to the Skeltar before finalizing anything, but I believe they can be convinced to participate. The fish spawn are the least trustworthy of all, Sub-Chieftain Thyra interjected. They speak in whispers and move in shadows. How can we be certain they won't betray us at the crucial moment? Because betrayal would doom them as much as anyone else, John replied. The Thorn Beast convergence threatens their underwater access tunnels to the crystal core sites. Without those tunnels, they'd lose their primary source of biomaterials for their advanced technologies. Krax stood from his throne, his massive frame casting dancing shadows in the lava light. Very well, Void Spawn. I will agree to this trial cooperation, but with conditions. If treachery occurs, from any party, the Vorthack will consider all previous agreements void. And you, he pointed directly at John, will answer personally for any deception. Understood, John replied, hoping his voice didn't betray his nervousness. I stake my life on the success of this venture. Good, Krax's teeth gleamed in what might have been a smile. A warrior who risks nothing gains nothing. ZYX 9742, inform your Council of Nodes that the Vorthack will participate in this Thornbeast expedition. But we do this as equals, not as subordinates to Cybertan planning. As they prepared to leave the volcanic stronghold, John felt both relief and trepidation. He had successfully negotiated with one of the three species, but the Skeltar remained an unknown quantity. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the suspicion that the mysterious fourth party manipulating events would not appreciate his diplomatic efforts. The journey to Skeltar territory would be even more challenging than reaching the Vorthack lands. The aquatic species lived primarily underwater, in cities built in the deepest ocean trenches where the pressure would crush any surface dweller instantly. Making contact with them would require technology that John wasn't sure even existed on Kepler Zendara. But as he looked back at the glowing volcanic city, watching Vorthack warriors prepare for what might be their first cooperative military action in centuries, John felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could help bring peace to this war-torn world while finding a way home to Earth.